All right, so I'm here with my friend Pat, and I wanted to interview him to ask him about what it's like to be an expat and what he's doing here in Vietnam. So, how old are you, Pat?
I'm 32.
And where did you grow up?
I'm from a town called Reading, which is very close to London.
What do you do for a living?
But now I teach English online. When I first moved to Vietnam, I was teaching in classrooms, but transitioned to online like a lot of teachers, I think.
When did you move abroad?
I moved to Vietnam permanently in 2017. I'd visited before, earlier that year. I had a friend, well I still have a friend called Jordan who moved out here, and I visited him and he assured me that I wouldn't want to leave, and he was right. Like, I liked the place so much that, and I saw the way that he was living. He was really enjoying his job. I was not enjoying my job back home.
What were you doing in England?
I was working in call centres mostly. That was where I met Jordan.
Okay.
I worked for the water company, the local water authority. I worked for a bank. I worked for Hewlett-Packard's on you know, technical support. The place where I met Jordan was a company that sold credit card machines, like chip and pin machines. I was technical support for that, so you know, you can imagine the fury of some of the customers I had when they couldn't take payments on a card, and you know,
And that's your fault.
yeah, well, yeah, like especially if it was somebody who's had problems in the past and has been assured everything's okay now, and then they call back 2 weeks later with a long line of customers and they can't take payments. Yeah, not fun at all.
So how did you get into teaching English? Did you just move here and start teaching right away, or did you do any sort of like preparation, or how did that go?
I did the TEFL course, just an online course, which was, you know, I didn't really learn much from it, but it gave me at least a little bit of certification. The first module I tried to study the material, but then when it came to the test at the end, the test was multiple choice and you had 3 attempts. So, you know.
How many choices?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's a multiple choice, and it, you know, I think it even told you the answers after the first attempt, so you know, not even really worth the paper it was printed on, to be honest. So yeah, like when I first got here, I wouldn't say I didn't know what I was doing exactly, but I am a lot better at teaching now. When I first started, it was very much like, okay, this week we're doing these 2 pages of the textbook, just go and do that.
Yeah.
And I didn't really deviate too much from the material I was given, but you know, doesn't really take too long until you start to pick up other little things from other teachers and add your own kind of flavor on classes. And yeah, so not all that much preparation, but still a bit more than some teachers that I've met out here who didn't even have the TEFL, you know.
You moved abroad, you said 2017. So you've been here about 6 years. Have you been here the entire time, or have you gone back?
I went back during COVID. Probably a lot of your viewers will know that COVID didn't really get into Vietnam at first. There was a short lockdown period for about 6 weeks. Cases dropped to 0, and then everything was open. I mean, the borders weren't open, people couldn't come and go, but businesses were open as usual. So Vietnam was probably one of the best, if not the best place to be in the world during the first year of COVID.
Yeah, it was pretty excellent.
Yeah. I had friends that went back home at the beginning of it because they thought, you know, Europe's probably going to be a safer place to be than Vietnam, but that did not work out at all, and they were kicking themselves. COVID did eventually get back into Vietnam in like May 2021, I think, right?
Yeah, it was about May and then lasted through October, at least in Saigon.
Yeah, and England was just starting to open up again at that time when Vietnam was closing, so I went back then. Didn't actually think I'd be back. because I started teaching online, but I kind of realized that, like, well, for a start, I like it here and I've got a lot of friends here, but with online teaching, the hours can fluctuate quite a bit. You can do 1 month, you might be getting 30 or 40 hours a week. The next month it could be 15. So I thought better to be somewhere where if my hours go below a certain level, I can easily pick up a classroom teaching job, which, you know, I can't do in Europe. So I decided to come back for that, and that was a little over a year ago. So like, yeah, end of 2022, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned that your friend Jordan told you about moving here. Was there any other reason that you wanted to move abroad and leave England?
Yeah, like I've been desperate to leave England since I was like, well, since I can remember, basically. Like I lived, I spent a fair bit of time in Sweden. I had a Swedish ex-girlfriend. I was living with her for a bit, and I just felt way more, I kind of felt more at home in Sweden than I ever did in England. I'm not really sure why that is. Maybe that would have worn off eventually. Maybe it's just the novelty of being somewhere new. But
yeah.
I kind of felt more, you know, I felt more like relaxed. I felt more alive, you could even say. And that was the same when I went traveling in 2013. Went to a few places in Europe and came to Southeast Asia, although I didn't make it to Vietnam. I've known for a long time that, like, you know, I love my country and there's a lot of things I like about it, but I don't really want to live there. Like, if you have visitors from the UK, they'll probably know what I mean. There's a pretty dismal mood in the air, and there has been for quite a while. So there was that, and
So you felt happier once you got out here?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you feel happier here in Vietnam versus Sweden?
It's difficult to say, because I was like that. I was a much younger man then. Like,
how old were you then?
21.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, that was my first girlfriend, and you know, everything was
right. Yeah.
So that was quite a buzz. But like, but yeah, when I first came out to Vietnam, I immediately fell in love with the place as well. Like, it took me a couple of days of being here to say, you know what, actually, Jordan, yeah, you were right. I think I'm gonna stay. You know, because I'd been to Thailand before. I spent a fair bit of time in Thailand, and I met some teachers there. So I knew that it was a possibility, but for some reason the pay is a lot lower in Thailand. They told me how many hours they were working and what they were making, and they said this is actually really good for an English teacher. And I sort of thought, okay, I like it here, but like that's I don't like it that much. You know?
How does it compare? How's the pay here, and then how is it in Thailand for comparison?
I mean, this was like 10 years ago, but they were making like, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but it weren't much. It was like, it was less than $10 an hour anyway.
Oh, wow.
They were making, yeah.
And what are you getting here about?
So, because I work online now, but
well, when you were working in person, what was it?
At Res it was like 525k an hour, which is like, what, that's like $22, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a big difference. It's
For
a
sure.
big difference.
Yeah,
so
twice the
I
amount.
knew it was a thing that people taught English out here, but I don't know, I guess because more people want to live in Thailand, it's more of a touristy place. It's you know,
That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah,
So they don't really have to. They don't have to draw you too much.
Yeah, sure. So I knew it was a thing, but I didn't know how different it was in Vietnam. Like, my friend told me before I got here what he was making, and I sort of thought there must be some kind of catch here. But when I went to see him, no catch. So easy decision, really.
Was there any sort of, I mean, people, I think it's a cliche term a little bit, but was there some sort of, I'll say culture shock, but you can interpret that as just things that you had to adjust to when you moved to Vietnam?
Not so much when I moved to Vietnam, because I'd already been to Southeast Asia. I'd already been to Thailand and Cambodia. But yeah, I mean, I can very vividly remember my first day in Bangkok. It was overwhelming. I mean, like the humidity for a start was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I can remember I was wearing like a button-up shirt for some reason on the plane. It must have been the only clean shirt I had after traveling in Europe, and yeah, I just remember the shirt sticking to my back, and like how that was a completely new sensation for me. And
yeah,
just like, I mean, we don't think twice about it now, but the like the phone cables, right? Like the
oh yeah,
like how chaotic, and well, they wouldn't pass health and safety regulations in Britain, to say the least. That was quite a stark difference from what I'm used to. You just wouldn't see that back home. And
yeah.
just the tuk-tuk drivers and the taxi drivers badgering you constantly. Like, now I know how it is. I just sort of, no thanks.
Right.
But then I'll sort of be like, no, actually, I think I might go over here, and
right.
and then they won't leave you alone, because, you know, they can smell it on you that you're new there and that. Like,
right.
So that was actually quite stressful the first couple of days. Yeah. And just like amenities, like at the first guest house I stayed at, I went to the first guest house I saw on Khao San Road, and, you know, the toilet was pretty grim. You just wouldn't see that back home. You get used to it, I guess. But yeah, that was before I moved to Vietnam. Then when I moved to Vietnam, I guess I kind of knew what to expect a little bit more.
Yeah, that makes sense. So when you got here, you knew Jordan, so you had at least one person out here. How did you go about like making friends and kind of like settling into the place, into Saigon, let's say?
I lived in Hanoi first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was staying at a hostel when I first got here, just like with the intention of staying there for a couple of weeks and getting a job and then getting an apartment, but I ended up staying at the hostel for like 6 months. So it's pretty easy to make friends in hostels, because there are a lot of like-minded people. There are a lot of people in the same boat as you.
Right.
So it didn't take long at all. So yeah, I knew Jordan, and I had one other friend who I met when I was traveling, who kind of the same as me. When he came to Hanoi and found out that teaching English was an option, he decided to stay. So, and he was staying at the hostel as well. It didn't take long to get talking to people. I'm still good friends with quite a lot of other people from that hostel to this day. And then yeah, when I moved to Saigon, which is where I met you, most if not all of the people that I made friends with were work colleagues. And again, it's the same, you know, like it's a bit different than working in an office back in England, where people have already got their friends, and, you know, maybe it could be a wide range of ages, right? So you don't necessarily make friends quite as easily. But teaching English in Vietnam, everyone's pretty much in the same boat. Everyone was new here at some point, right? So
yeah.
it's quite a lot easier to make friends, I found.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think the exact things you said, everyone's kind of on the same page. Also, you kind of all earn the same amount of money. So
sure.
You just have the same amount of access, kind of.
Yeah. Like it's a new experience for everyone.
Yeah.
So it's quite easy to find common ground. I mean,
right.
if you're working in an office back in the West, I mean, okay, yeah, you're doing the same job, but it doesn't really define you quite as much.
I didn't have any international friends before I came here. For the first time, I met like South Africans here, and I started having a lot of British friends. Was that the same for you? Did you have international friends when you were living in England, or was that more of a...
Not really. Like, I had some friends in Sweden who were Swedish, of course. And when I went traveling the first time, I made friends from all over the place, but I didn't really stay in touch with that many of them. A couple of them a little bit. Yeah, it was more so the first time I went traveling that I was introduced to, you know, a wider pool of people.
And are people pretty, like, I guess no matter where they're from, are they still pretty open to being friends and hanging out? Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I think one thing to remember is that a person from America or Russia or even England who comes to live or even just comes to travel in Southeast Asia is not necessarily a typical Brit or Russian or American.
That's a good point.
So everyone, well, not everyone, but the vast majority of expats and travelers that I've met here have been pretty open and friendly, because otherwise what's the point, right? Like otherwise why would you why would you come out here just to, you know, insulate yourself? Wouldn't really make a lot of sense. You may as well stay home, right? But,
right.
Yeah, I've heard that from like we're in Mui Ne now, right? There's a big Russian expat community here. I lived here for a short time, and Russians do have this reputation of being like kind of cold and standoffish. I didn't find that at all, but some of the Russians here have told me, yeah, we'll go to Russia, see what they're like there. They're not like here. So
that's interesting.
there is that. And like a lot of Americans don't even own a passport, right? So
true.
Just by being out here, you know, the Americans out here are probably a little bit different than the typical American. But yeah, I found the vast majority of expats, travelers, to be pretty open-minded and friendly, sure.
How long did you spend living in Hanoi, and how long have you lived in Saigon?
I was in Hanoi for about 6 or 7 months initially.
And then Saigon?
Saigon maybe for like 2 years after that.
How would you compare the two places? Which one do you like more? And
I personally prefer Hanoi, but I can see why someone would prefer Saigon. They're quite different. Hanoi's, in my opinion, more charming in terms of architecture. Like, it's a prettier city.
Yeah.
It has a more of a unique vibe to it. It's more traditional still. Saigon's more westernized. It feels kind of like Hanoi has all of these weird and wonderful little back alleys. It's easy to get lost in Hanoi. Saigon a little bit as well, but Saigon's more of like a grid structure, the way that the city planning, right?
Oh, that's very true, yeah.
I think that Hanoi's more my kind of vibe in terms of the expat scene. It's more dive bars than sort of cocktail bars, right? Like, I mean, Saigon's more yeah, you'll find like wine bars and, you know, IPA bars and stuff. You can find all of that in Saigon, which is cool, but, you know, I prefer the sort of more dirty places, to be honest.
I do too. I do, especially when I'm back in America. Those are
yeah. And also I think it's a bit of a younger crowd in Hanoi. It seems that way to me anyway. Maybe it's you know, maybe that's just the people that I hang out with, but I found that in Saigon the average age of expats is a fair bit higher, I think. In Hanoi as well, all of the expats live in the same district, Teho. In Saigon, most expats live in Tao Dien, but they are quite spread out, so it's kind of more of a tight-knit community with expats in Hanoi, I think, which I like. I appreciate that.
Do you think it's more, because it's more tight-knit, would you say the expats there are more insular in terms of like how much they interact with local Vietnamese, or is it pretty similar?
I think it's pretty similar, yeah. I think that it's pretty similar. Yeah, it's a good question actually. I didn't really notice much of a difference, but that could well be the case. That would make sense.
What do you like most about Vietnam?
So I don't know if this is what I like most, but something that I really appreciate is the lack of bureaucracy compared to back home. Like, I've made the joke before that like it's more difficult to buy a SIM card in England than it is to rent an apartment in Vietnam. Like, the amount of red tape put in your way if you want to like rent an apartment, for example, in England, it's suffocating. But here it's just let me take a scan of your passport, there's the contract, there's can I have the deposit, and yeah, there's the keys. Same with, you know, like renting a motorbike or just doing a lot of things. Things are just less strict. I can remember I went into a bank to change out my I had like a load of 100k and 200k notes, and I wanted to get them changed into bigger notes, and I gave it to the lady behind the till, and she said, oh no, we can't do that. And I sort of said, go on, you can, can't you? And she went, ah, yeah, okay, fine. And that's in a bank, right? Like, you know, you go into a bank back home and say, I want to do this, and they say no. Yeah, good luck, it's not happening here. But here, you know, people are kind of more chilled out with that kind of stuff. They don't
so just easier to get stuff done a little bit.
Yeah, like that usually works in your favor. I mean, sometimes the relative lack of organization can be annoying. Like if you're waiting for something in the post, for example, you know, you get an email saying it's arrived. You go to the post office and it's like, oh no, we don't know. And
Yeah.
so that can be it can be annoying sometimes, but usually the relative lack of bureaucracy works in your favor. I appreciate that a lot.
What do you dislike the most about Vietnam?
The traffic, man. Like the driving. It's not even, when I say traffic, I don't just mean there are traffic jams, because usually the traffic's moving, actually, isn't it? Like the traffic moves, you don't normally get stuck, but people drive like absolute lunatics. Every single time I get on a bike, like, I have like a heart in mouth moment. In the big cities anyway, like in Da Nang and in Mui Ne, it's not quite so bad. But yeah, I find driving very, very, very stressful here. Like, I'm not the best driver in the world. I've never driven a motorbike back home. So I drive very cautiously, like I drive slowly. But yeah, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone's not just going to pull out of some alley without looking and make you slam on the brakes. So yeah, I don't look forward to driving here. That would probably be my least favorite thing about Vietnam. Yeah.
What's your favorite place in Vietnam? What's your favorite city or town or place that you've been?
Da Lat actually left a big impression on me. I was only there for a few days, so I can't necessarily say it's my favorite place because I've never lived there, but yeah, it's special. Da Lat's very, very special.
Why do you like it though?
I mean, the scenery,
yeah,
is breathtaking. Me and my friend Oshin went to, I can't remember the name of the lakes, but they were surrounded by these huge sort of mansions, and yeah, it was I've just not really ever seen anything like that. Like, I remember we were speculating, like, how much do you think these houses had cost?
Yeah.
Because it was almost like I imagined Switzerland to be, but you know, it's in Vietnam, and
yeah.
Just the and it wasn't just these huge houses. The architecture there was pretty special, and it's surrounded by, you know, rolling mountains covered in jungle.
That's interesting, because we went there recently, and Trang's brother was saying that the Swiss actually helped them engineer and design the railroad that went up there. And it was,
that would make sense.
Yeah, based on like a cog system, where, because they were climbing so steep that they had to engineer a whole new system. So maybe the Swiss actually did influence architecture.
Well, like, I think it was I can't remember exactly what the backstory is, but it was a team of scientists from France and probably Switzerland as well that were doing some kind of research up in the mountains and in the jungle, and they kind of just decided, oh, let's build a city here. So
that's how
it kind of has a European feel to it, as well as a Vietnamese feel. It's like a real fusion between the two.
Yeah,
and you could probably say the same about Hanoi, but Hanoi, it feels more Vietnamese than European, even though you can feel the French influence. But Da Lat, maybe more of a 50-50 split. That left quite a big impression on me. But Hoi An's absolutely beautiful as well. Hoi An's charming. It's a must-see if anyone ever comes to Vietnam. Like, you have to see Hanoi, right? It's a pretty special place as well.
And that's really close to Da Nang. Have you lived in Da Nang yet, or have you just visited?
I visited a few times. I'm going to be moving there soon.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like 30 minutes from Da Nang.
Right.
Yeah, the first time I ever went, the road there was completely full of potholes. It was an absolute death trap, but I was there again recently. The roads are, you know, smooth as now.
Do you have any plans on living somewhere else besides Vietnam, or perhaps returning to England, or where do you see yourself in like 5 years?
Europe, I think. I should have an Irish passport any day now.
That's cool.
I'm of Irish ancestry, so I'm eligible for an Irish passport. Not because I want to live in Ireland, like, no offence Ireland, but it's pretty, you know, it's pretty similar to England, right? Like, they'll hate that as well.
That's all right.
They'll hate that as well. But yeah, Ireland's in the EU and Britain isn't, so with an Irish passport I can live in like Eastern Europe, because I'm working online now. Cost of living in Eastern Europe's quite a lot lower than Western Europe, and I like it there. I've been there as well, so that's that's probably the plan. Maybe Romania, I'm not 100% sure yet.
Oh, that's very cool. I was wondering what the Irish passport would give you, but yeah, the EU access.
EU access, exactly.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
getting an Irish passport so I can live in Romania.
That's hey, I've always thought if there was somewhere in Europe that I might want to live, that I was thinking Romania as well, or somewhere in Eastern Europe.
Yeah. It is like I never would have thought Romania would be an interesting or beautiful place at all, but I went there a couple of years ago and was very pleasantly surprised.
Really?
Yeah. The capital city, Bucharest, not so much, but Brasov and Cluj.
How's the cost of living there?
I mean, it's higher than here, but it's like somewhere in the middle of here in England, I'd say.
Okay.
Although, having said that, like outside of the capital city, it's still a bit more expensive than Saigon, but not much more. So, yeah, I mean, if we're comparing the capital city to the two capital cities here, then it's more expensive, but the smaller towns probably about a little bit more expensive than here, so not too bad at all.
Let's bring it back to Vietnam. How do the cost of living compare in Hanoi and Saigon?
Saigon's more expensive, like noticeably so, but it's not drastic necessarily. Like I think rent is where it's most noticeable. Food and drinks, not too much difference, but I think rent in Saigon is noticeably more expensive, especially since COVID actually. It was more expensive before, but it seems that prices in Saigon have gone up more than they have in Hanoi. Maybe that's just my perception, but a couple of other people have said the same thing. So yeah, like Saigon's noticeably more expensive, but it's not the world of difference, but it's noticeable.
And we're here in Mui Ne right now. You lived here as well, right? How did you enjoy living here in this like smaller beach city?
It was a big change of pace from Saigon, and I needed that at the time. I've been in Saigon for a while, and I had a difficult personal situation, so it was really time to get out. And I could have gone back to Hanoi, but it was the right choice to come here. You know, much slower pace of life. No traffic. I was here during COVID, so the place was pretty, not like completely empty, but very laid back compared to the cities. I got into a really nice routine here. I think that's just easier to do when your surroundings are nicer. If you wake up every morning and you're just looking at glass and concrete,
yeah,
that's quite different to when you're waking up and you're looking out at this, right?
Yeah.
So like,
that's the ocean over there, by the way. You can't really see it right now, but we are on the beach.
Yeah, trust me,
there's sand right here, you can see.
Yeah, like I got into a really nice routine. I was waking up early, going to the gym. I actually picked up some Russian here, as the language, that is, not a person. I picked up some Russian. Yeah, I was learning Russian, going to the gym, and like, you know, I don't think I would have done that in Saigon because it's just different, and like it's there's less of a temptation to get steaming drunk here as well, because you know it's just a different atmosphere. It doesn't lend itself as well to that sort of stuff as like the bar scene in Saigon or Hanoi, right?
Right, yeah, maybe the access to vices is just a little bit more limited, so.
Yeah, and I guess this kind of place attracts a certain kind of person as well, like, so the friends that I made here weren't really big drinkers so much, so yeah, again, that's gonna reduce the temptation quite a lot, right?
For sure, yeah. So you're gonna move to Da Nang. You've been there before. Are you gonna continue to teach online? Is that your plan there?
Yeah. The reason why I've not taken another classroom job in Vietnam is because I can continue to teach online when I go back to Europe, so I wouldn't really want to sacrifice any of that to start teaching in a classroom here, and then I have to leave. Like I've got quite a lot of regular students now, and I wouldn't want to lose them, because you know I'm gonna go back to Europe most likely. So
you got that location independence. That's huge.
Yeah. I'm in a very privileged position. I try to remind myself how lucky I am every day, you know, like
Yeah.
it's a very privileged position I'm in.
What advice do you have for someone who's considering moving to Vietnam or moving abroad?
Yeah, good question. Bear in mind that it's not the same as it is back home. Sometimes it does take longer to get things done. Things don't always run quite as smoothly, which, as I said before, that can actually work in your favor sometimes. But bear that in mind. Don't expect people to speak English, you know what I mean? Like, I always find it really cringe. Like the other day, I was on a tourist bus and these two like English girls, and they were like in their early 20s. They were getting pissy with the driver because he couldn't understand what they were saying, and they were speaking really fast and that, and they were getting pissy that he didn't understand what they were saying. I found that really like embarrassing and cringe. So yeah, bear that, man. You know, don't Vietnamese people are very accommodating and very patient, but you know, if they don't speak English, you know, that's your problem. That's not theirs, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Here in Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But yeah. Those would be two things to keep in mind, but those are more like cautionary points. But we mentioned before, it's very easy to make friends. You don't really need to worry about that too much. Even if you're not a particularly outgoing person, you'll find friends pretty easily if you're teaching. While it is quite different, it's maybe not as different as some people think it is. Like when I go back home, I have friends or people I went to school with who I bump into, like, what, are you living in the jungle? Do they have the internet? And all this sort of stuff, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh are modern metropolises. So, you know, it's a developing country, but like there are things to do you won't really want for anything. You know, it's a different world, but it's not that different, you know what I mean? They do have the internet, right? You know what I mean?
Well, it's awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this interview today. Yeah, and yeah, good luck to you and your move to Da Nang.
So thanks for listening.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview and you got some value out of it. If you liked the video, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, support the growth, and leave any comments. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear from y'all, and I'll see you in the next vlog. Peace.